Friend, what a powerful description of that babe in Bethlehem. How this concise statement of the Apostle Paul lifts us beyond our sentimentality to the divine realities of who Christ is and why he came. There's no way in which I could capture the magnificent things that are recorded there for us. You heard Eric read that picture of the invisible God, the creator, the sustainer, the King of all kings, the one who is before all things, who holds all things together, the head of the church, the firstborn from the dead, the one in whom the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, the preeminent one. My friend, that is a picture of Jesus. And instead of making a futile effort to expound these themes on this Advent Sunday, I'd like to focus briefly on two words. Both words are recorded there in that text. And taken together, they are the core of the purpose of Christmas. These words are alienation and reconciliation. That first word, alienation. In verse 21, we read, "Once you were alienated from God." That word, like no other, captures the reason for Christmas. Alienation means broken relationship. That is why we have Christmas. Because of alienation. There are all kinds of alienation that exist. Let me share a couple with you. There's alienation between humankind and nature. I want to quote for you an article from the Christian Century by John Cobb, a retired professor of theological philosophy at Claremont School of Theology. He states these disturbing facts. If today is a typical day on planet Earth, we will lose 116 square miles of rainforest. We will lose another 72 square miles of encroaching deserts, the result of human mismanagement and overpopulation. Today, the human population will increase by 250,000. And today, we will add 2,700 tons of chlorofluorocarbons and 15 million tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Tonight, the earth will be a little hotter and its waters more acidic. Those are some mind-boggling statements, aren't they? How about the alienation between human beings? We can talk about the wars in Afghanistan or Syria, or how we've been supporting the Saudis in their war with Yemen, where we heard the report last week of over 85,000 children who died in that war. Thank God the Senate had the courage to vote to end that support. We don't have to go all the way to the Middle East to talk about alienation. Let's look at right here in our country. Do you know that there have been over 300 mass shootings here in America in 2018 alone? How about the gap between Republicans and Democrats? Black and white, rich and poor. We could talk about that separation that exists between husband and wives that result in separation and divorce over money management, child rearing, sex, in-laws, religion, lifestyles. The pain is real. Alienation is real. Then there is that alienation between humankind and God. I read the story about a theologian who was having a casual golf game with a the local club pro. Finding out that the man was a theologian, the club pro began to harass him, making comments such as, "You preachers, how do you have fun in life? I don't see how anyone could believe in God." Then the club pro proceeded to drive that ball over 300 yards in superhuman strength. The theologian just kept playing, saying little. Then on the 15th hole, stooping over, concentrating on a putt, as only a pro can concentrate, he looked up in deep emotion and said, "You can't tell me there's a God. For if there is a God, how could he allow my 6-week-old baby to die?" The theologian, with all the courage he could muster up, responded, "Your problem isn't that you don't believe in God. It's that you hate God for the death of your baby." And when you and I experience pain and death and sorrow and frustration, our anger tends to direct itself toward the ultimate concern in life, the living God. God does not react to our anger. God allows us to express it, no matter how inappropriate it may be. God takes the brunt of it, whether it's active hostility or passive rebellion. Let me share with you one more alienation, and that is from ourselves. We human beings are experts in living in denial. We tell ourselves we don't need this myth called an internal being. We don't need other people. After all, these relationships can hurt. They can move us and take us away from our comfort zone. They require too much of us. But you and I were created by God, like God, to be in relationship, not only with God, but with each other. It's important that you hear me repeat that over and over and over again, because we sometimes forget. Because unless you and I are working on those kinds of relationship God expects of us, we will not have God's peace, no matter how many pleasurable, satisfying things or pursuits we experience. Alienation is why Jesus Christ came. That second word is the word reconciliation. For this God of all creation has taken a good, hard look at you and me in our alienation and has done something about it. And unless we allow Jesus Christ to be factored into that relational interplay with nature, with other people, with ourselves, we won't experience reconciliation. Christ is the great reconciler. Verse 22 of our text. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Can you picture that in your mind? Here is the righteous one who created you and me in his image and likeness to live dynamic lives. But something happened called sin. We became broken people living in a broken world. Jesus emerges in the midst of that incarnation, fully God, fully human, in a miracle which you and I can neither fully understand. This God is Jesus who arrests you by his grace and leads you back to the embrace of that loving, waiting Father. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation, for by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. This Jesus observes us in our fracturedness, in our brokenness. This Jesus reaches out to you and me with his nail-printed hands, picking up the fragments, beginning to mold you and me back together in wholeness. Yes, you and I were estranged, once alienated, once hostile, doing things we should not have been doing, and leaving undone the things we should have done. Jesus now reconciled you and me, making us blameless before God's eyes. My dear friend, in the incarnation, God set into motion the greatest love story ever told. In human history, 2,000 plus years ago, the Son of God entered into the world to prove his love. And there are symbols that demonstrate that love. A star, a manger, a carpenter's shop, a robe, sandals, bread and wine, thorns, a cross, an empty manger, tongues of fire. Within these symbols, but not bound by them, is the crucified Christ. This love story called the Incarnation takes people who are carving up nature, carving up other people, God themselves, and brings peace, reconciliation where there's been hostility and estrangement. But there's a problem. Some people just don't want peace or reconciliation. Perhaps more correctly, some people don't want to admit that they cannot handle their problems. They are filled with pride, which after all is said and done, is the root of alienation. 2 words. I hope you never forget them. Alienation, reconciliation. And one name that is above all names, Jesus Christ. I urge you, my friend, with all the passion in me, to right now open your life to the Savior. Christmas 2018 is nothing but a hollow, empty, cultural holiday unless you are willing to acknowledge alienation and be reconciled to the God of all creation through Jesus Christ.